welcome back to another edition of Components Breakdown. Today I will be looking at Gears of War the board game, which is the long-awaited release of Fantasy Flight Games' take on yet another very popular and critically acclaimed video game franchise. For those who are not familiar with the series of Xbox 360 titles, Gears of War follows the exploits of the Coalition of Organized Governments, or COG's, highly trained Delta Squad as they fight to save the inhabitants of the fictional planet of Sera from a very relentless and virtually unstoppable subterranean enemy known as the Locust Horde. In Gears of War the board game, 1 to 4 players will take on the roles of these same popular COG soldiers, cooperating to hunt down and destroy the Locust Horde once and for all, and must work together to complete missions against a very challenging and varied game system that is run completely by the game's own artificial intelligence. Let's first take a look at the game's well-produced set of components. The first, and easily most visually attractive of the game's components that players will take notice of, are the fantastic set of over 30 highly detailed miniatures that are included for both the COG and Locust figures. Now, although these are not pre-painted, the level of detail in these are simply amazing for a board game, and rank right up there as one of the industry's best. Players will be moving their pieces across these 17 double-sided map tiles that make up the game's 7 possible missions. Each of these missions are constructed through the use of very specific location cards, which are shuffled into decks and drawn at random, creating different and varied layouts even when playing the same missions repeated times. Location cards also include 2 additional sets of information, including any special abilities that the map tile might provide, to which Locust figures might spawn at setup on that tile according to the number of players participating. Each player will then choose one of the 4 unique COG characters to play, collecting their appropriate character card, which lists that player's starting weapons, ammunition, grenades, defense value, and any other special abilities that are specific to that character. Each scenario in the game is organized by the mission reference sheet, which shows all the necessary mission components for the game, including the previously mentioned set of location cards, as well as the enemy cards, the weapon deck, the AI deck, and the order deck, all of which I will discuss further in the gameplay section of this video. Apart from these sets of components, the game also includes a large number of cardboard tokens that represent everything from wound markers for the enemy Locust figures to grenade and ammunition tokens for the COG players' weapons. Finally, the game's combat system itself is run by a set of black attack and red defense dice, which determine both how many wounds an attack may deal, including the triggering of any special abilities, to how many wounds the defender can prevent. In Gears of War the board game, each player controls a COG soldier, fighting to save humanity from the threat of the Locust Horde. At the start of the game, each player places their corresponding figure on the entrance of the starting map tile, which is denoted by the small white arrow. Each mission in the game includes a different set of objectives that players must fulfill in order to win, and being a fully cooperative experience, players must collectively work together at all times if they hope to survive what can at times feel like a relentless onslaught of Locust enemies. The game is played over a number of turns until either the group as a whole has completed all of the mission objectives or all the COG soldiers are bleeding out. A typical game turn in Gears of War is actually quite simple to learn and includes only 3 main phases before passing to the next player in turn order. The first phase for the active player is entitled the Heal Step and allows them to draw up to 2 order cards from the top of the order deck without exceeding their hand limit, which is normally 6 total cards. Now, this step is very important in Gears of War since a COG soldier's health is always equal to the number of cards that are in their hand. And when a COG soldier drops to 0 cards in hand, that player's miniature is laid on its side as if it was wounded and is considered to be bleeding out until someone is able to revive them on a later turn. The second phase is the COG order step, which forces the active player to choose one and only one order card from their hand to discard in order to perform one of 3 possible choices. Those choices being that they can resolve all of the actions that are printed upon the card itself, that they may move up to 2 total areas, or that they may perform 1 single attack. During this step, the player may also discard additional cards from their hand in order to take any special actions, essentially costing them 1 health per action. Now, these special actions are area specific and include such things as reviving a fallen cog soldier, activating any special equipment or location cards, or picking up any dropped weapons from destroyed locust figures. The third and final phase of a player's turn is the Locust activation step, where the active player draws the top card of the Locust AI deck and resolves it according to a set number of parameters that are listed on the card, which usually allows certain Locust figures to move, attack, or spawn within specific areas of the map. Besides these basic gameplay structures, the other two most important mechanics to fully understand within Gears of War are the combat system and the reactionary abilities of a player's order cards. The combat system is actually quite simple, so I won't spend too much time on it here. Players will basically utilize their weapons and ammunition to roll dice in hopes of doing damage to targeted enemies during the cog order step. The amount of dice that a player rolls is determined by a number of different factors, including the weapon that they choose to fire, the range at which the enemy is located, and whether or not the player wishes to expend ammunition in order to perform an overkill, which basically allows the player to roll additional dice for that attack. As for the order cards, each type of card has one of 3 possible reactionary abilities on its upper left-hand corner, which is represented by a unique icon. Players are allowed at any time to discard that order card from their hand to gain the associated ability, which include guard, dodge, and follow. However, using reaction abilities does make a player vulnerable in return, since a player's hand size is also their total amount of health. So giving away too many cards in this manner can sometimes result in a counterattack that leaves the players bleeding out. In regards to the reaction abilities themselves, Guard allows a player to interrupt a Locust attack or movement by attacking the Locust figure prior to their action. Dodge is going to allow a cog soldier to roll 2 additional defense dice during an attack from a Locust figure, and Follow allows a cog soldier to move along with the active cog player, which can be essential for keeping the team together and focused on a very specific task. Let me get right to the point here. Gears of War the board game is a very well designed and produced, although fairly standard cooperative game that does make excellent use of the license from which it was derived. There's definitely a lot of flavor in the game's set of components that hardcore fans of the video game series will immediately recognize and appreciate, and by having the game's order cards represent the actions that a player can take, as well as the character's current health, the game tends to take on a very defined and stylized system of risk and reward that caters well to groups of players that are both well organized and work together as a team, which in my opinion is really the greatest strength of this particular title. Despite this though, Gears of War is just not that deep of a game, especially once you realize that everything literally relies on nothing more than the roll of the dice, which can be incredibly frustrating and cruel even when played with the most strategic of tactical choices. For me, there is simply not enough options and customization for a game of this type, and even after playing several of the game's missions, we soon realize that although the title is mechanically sound, the gameplay becomes very repetitive, especially when some of these missions can last upwards of 2 to 3 hours to finish. All in all, Gears of War is not by any means a bad game or one to be avoided, it's just not a very deep one, and tends to rely too heavily on dice rather than strong strategic choices. So that is Gears of War the board game. I am Jeremy Salinas, and thank you again for watching.